Well, God bless you, everybody. This is Pastor Amir Khan, and boy, we have a great one for you today. I am so excited about having my great friend, Reverend Derick Green, on this great broadcast today. Reverend Green, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Amir, and I'm honored to be on here with you this evening, and all the great work that you do for the city of Camden throughout the state. We really are blessed to have you as one of our great leaders in the state of New Jersey.
Well, thank you much. Thank you very much. I'll tell you what, this is exciting because obviously this week, boy, Thursday is going to be a great day. That whole transition will be taking place. But there's so many questions that many of us have of what brought us up to this point. And you've been giving us such great revelation about, the stampede on the Capitol and everybody talking about 1776. And you got this revelation about 1876. And just, you have the history. You were by the way, listening audience, Reverend Green was a adjunct professor of African American history at Washington State Seventh-day Adventist University there in Maryland. Many of you know him, of course, as senior advisor to Governor Murphy. Been involved in so many different campaigns, probably 15, 20 campaigns over the past several decades, Corazon and others. Two great campaigns where you were victorious in the Caribbean islands. But boy, the history that you have in reference to where we are right now. There's a scripture in Chronicles that said the men of Issachar, they had an understanding of the times and they knew what they ought to do with it. And I know you have some divine revelation in reference to understanding the times and what we ought to do with it. So without any further ado, Reverend Green, I just want to sit back and take notes. Let's talk about what's going on and what's coming up on Tuesday evening. Let me turn it over to Reverend Derick Green. Thank you, for being with us this night.
Well, thank you, Pastor. When I saw the tragic events on January the 6th, when I was watching the television, and I sat there like everyone else watching television. I was hurt by what I saw. God put into my spirit that this is not anything new. And when I heard references to when the rioters, the mob, the terrorists were talking about 1776, God put into my spirit, no, this is not about 1776. This was about 1876. It was more in line with what happened in the presidential election of 1876. Oftentimes, we think that things are new, but I grew up knowing that nothing is new under the sun. And if we know our history, then we'd be able to better address and assess the things that are happening today. So on our I Am call, this is Interfaith Action Movement. We were talking about it like we do. We talk about issues every morning, issues of the day, because our mission is to address the spiritual, social, and economic needs of underserved and marginalized communities throughout the state, nation, and the globe. And we're doing just that. And I praise God for the Interfaith Action Movement. We were talking about the history of uprisings and violence and white privilege. And so Dr. Stephanie James Harris, who is our resident historian on the call, who is also the executive director of the Amistad Commission here in New Jersey, recommended, and matter of fact, Pastor, was you who asked if we could get this information to the broader public. And I said, absolutely. But I wanted to include Dr. Stephanie James Harris, who is a brilliant historian. And we've come up with a title, and it's Uprisings, Violence, and Privilege, and the upheaval, or the, what do we say, Amir?
We said upending.
Upending.
This is exciting. As a matter of fact, Dr. Harris is going to be on the program tomorrow, the following day. So they'll be able to hear from you, part one, and Dr. Stephanie Harris, part two. But the title you guys came up with was How Uprising, Violence, and Privilege Have Upended Democracy.
That's right. That's right. Oh, we're gonna dive into that in a major way on Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. You don't want to miss this. And I wanted to give you a snapshot.
Yes.
In 1870, you're going to hear the rioters and the terrorists try to liken what they did to the freedom, the struggle for freedom of the 13 original colonies in 1776. You're going to also hear them talking about the war of you're also going to hear historians and political scientists and others try to make similarities between what happened in the War of 1812 and what happened on January the 6th, 2021. But God put into my spirit that no. What happened in the presidential election of 1876, which ultimately ended Reconstruction in 1877 with the Compromise of 1877, is more in line to what is going on today with what happened on January the 6th. Because what happened on January the 6th has everything to do with the African American vote, the Black and Brown vote, the Civil Rights Coalition vote that defeated President Trump, and why President Trump has spent weeks focusing on 4 cities: Philadelphia, which has a direct impact on the city of Camden, Detroit, Atlanta, and Milwaukee. Now, on Tuesday, we're going to go back to 1876 and the presidential election of Rutherford B. Hayes versus Samuel Tilden, the governor of New York, and the Compromise of 1877, and how Florida and Louisiana and South Carolina played a huge role in their rush to do a compromise, which had a direct impact on the livelihood of African American people for years to come. And as a matter of fact, Dr. King was born. When he was born, I believe it was 1929. I believe Dr. King was born. He was born not too long, 50 years or so, 60 years after this, 50 years after this great compromise that we're going to talk about on Tuesday. And after that great compromise happened, I want the people to understand this. There were massive mobs and rioting and terrorism. Because what people don't realize is that during Reconstruction, after the South, I'm not going to go too much into it. We're going to wait a little bit, Amir, for Tuesday, but I get excited when I talk about this, because when the Civil War happened, and I want people to understand that the Civil War was a war between 2 countries. We always say the North and the South. That's not accurate. It was the war of 2 countries. The South has seceded from the Union and created a different country called the Confederation of American States. And they had a president named Jefferson Davis, that they formed a country to keep slavery. That's what they did. The Civil War was fought over the issue. People want to say, oh, states' rights. It wasn't just slavery. There were other things involved. The main issue was slavery. And when the United States of America, the Union, won, they began a system called Reconstruction to really reconstruct and to bring about the necessary changes and to really permanently integrate the African American, the former slave, into society. And so they sent troops down to ensure the successful reintegration of the United States of America. During that time, African Americans had, primarily men, had the right to vote. And so there were many local elected officials. There were local Black people that represented their communities in the state houses. There were congressmen elected. There were sheriffs. Dr. Stephanie will go into it more on tomorrow. We had Black people represented in every aspect, every level of government. And when they compromised, and we're going to go into the compromise of 1877, after the election of a presidential election of 1876, the three things, Pastor Amir, that they wanted to ensure. One, I'm talking about the South.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to ensure that the United States of America would remove the troops from the South. Two, there was some type of railroad deal that they wanted, some rail deal that they wanted. And three, they wanted the government, the federal government, to stay out of the affairs of how the South treated the Negro.
Wow. That's history. There's not plenty of history courses in college and high school. I never heard that one, brother.
That's right. Most people don't know it. And what happened after that, when the troops were removed, there were mobs just like what happened on January the 6th. And God showed it to me. I had studied, my degree is in history, my undergraduate degree is in history. So I studied this. I studied at Oakwood College in Huntsville, Alabama, and I studied it at Rutgers University here in Newark, and at University of Maryland School of Public Affairs in College Park, Maryland. And mobs went into state houses, and they pulled, literally, Amir, pulled Black representatives out of the state houses. They ran Black elected officials out of town. Some of them were killed. Some of them had families had to move completely out of town because of terroristic threats. And the Southern Democrats, they held power because many of the Blacks that were in office were Republican, because the Republican Party at that time was the party of Lincoln, who freed the slaves. And it was violence. It was uprisings and the politics of the day that sent us down as Black people down a road of de facto and de jure segregation, the road of Jim Crow, the road of separate but equal, the road of lynchings, the road of unemployment, the road of systemic oppression that lasted all the way until 1954 under Brown versus Board of Education, that lasted all the way until 1964 Civil Rights Act and 1965 Voting Rights Act. By the way, Amir, it was in 1965 where the new Republican Party was established. And the new Republican Party that was established was made up of the old Southern Dixiecrats, who were Democrats. Yes. When Lyndon Baines Johnson, when Congress passed, and he pressured Congress to pass the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the Southern Democrats left, the Dixiecrats left the party and joined the Republican Party. And so the DNA of the modern day Republican Party is a DNA of racism and voter suppression, which is why you have the election of Donald Trump in 2016.
Hey, Reverend Wood, I just got to ask you, tell me how the Confederate flag, I mean, this optic is so visual in our minds of that guy walking through the Capitol with that Confederate flag. How does the whole Confederate flag, and they just say it's just part of our history, they know what they're doing with that Confederate flag. Talk about the importance and the meaning of that.
The Confederate flag is symbolism. It is the symbolism of rebellion. It is the symbolism of a system of the South that went up against the Union, the federal government. It is a system of, we're going to keep our culture of slavery. We're going to keep our culture it's really to create a sense of Southern nationalism, of not just Southern nationalism, but of racist nationalism. When it is similar to the swastika. It's a meaning of supremacy, of rule, of we are over you, Black people. We're going to keep you as slaves. We're going to keep you as second-class citizens, and we are going to rebel in a nationalistic. That's why when Donald Trump talks about nationalism, Amir, this was all done by design to awaken. The Republican Party for many years has played around with this group. They have courted this group. Oh yeah, they've courted this group in their language, in their communication, in how they get votes, how they express themselves as it relates to policies. And they can't say Black anymore, so they say taxes. They can't say Black anymore, so they say war on, and not just Republicans, but also some Democrats too.
Yep.
War on poverty. I'm sorry, not war on poverty, war on drugs.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 strikes and you're out. This is code words. The Republican Party, they were winning with these code words. You had Nixon, code words. You had Reagan, code words. You had Bush, code words. And what Clinton did was Clinton knew that the country was conservative. So he was what they called a centrist Democrat. And what that meant that you move to the center, right? So you words like 3 strikes and you're out, right? That got votes because for many white suburban folks, like somehow Black people don't, we also want safe communities, right? We want safe, Black and brown people want safe communities like anybody else does. But what happened was, what they were saying is, we are going to be tough on Black men.
Wow. I'm excited.
That's been going on since slavery. The fight against Black men, to keep Black men in control, to keep Black men from protecting and preserving their families, to keep Black men scared of being lynched, where your body parts are cut off and you have to die a vicious death amongst a mob. We're going to talk about mobs on Tuesday. Did you know, Amir, that they used to have when they had hangings, they would get dressed up. Their children would get dressed up. And it was almost like a party where Black men, mainly Black men, some Black women too, but mainly Black men were hung in public. That's why when I heard them say, hang Mike Pence, this was no just regular mob. This was an educated mob. This was an intentional mob. They knew what they were saying, Amir, because they knew their history and they knew that they could take people out and hang them in public in front of a mob of people, and people would clap and they would cheer on, and they would also take body parts home with them as souvenirs.
I don't know. I know you were out this past couple hours. Did you get a chance to see on TV new video that came out? Now they're showing actually somehow they did it when the mob was all there. They built, so they must have carried wood with them. They marked. Did you see that with the noose hanging? How do you build it that quick? Set it up and a noose there. And even though they're saying hang Mike Pence, I think there's a lot of symbolism there as well. But I want you to address that. But also, I want you to address the importance of what took place in Georgia 2 weeks ago.
Yes. So these folks know their history. They know their history. And that was a message sent to Black people. Even though it was saying hang Mike Pence, that was a message to us.
Yes.
It was a message because that's what they did when they lynched Emmett Till. They were sending a message to Black boys. This is what happens to you when you don't fall in, if you don't fall in line. The lynchings, Amir, were to season us.
Wow.
Okay. There was something called seasoning when the slave came on. You get me excited. I missed my class at WAU when we talked about seasoning.
Mm-hmm.
When the slave came, when the African, the bold, brilliant kings and queens were stolen from Africa, and many of them, Amir, had to go through hell, a literal hell, stacked on top of. I invite people to go to the Baltimore Blacks and Wax Museum and go to the slave ship exhibit so they can see what Black people had to go through when they were stolen from their native land and brought over, stacked on top of each other, feces and urine, and there were no bathrooms. There are reports that you could smell a slave ship from miles away before it hit the port, miles away before it hit Perth Amboy, miles away before it hit Charleston, and many slaves when they were over here suffered from depression. I do in order to make the slave trade and slavery real in my class, if you were a psychology major, I would ask the psychology major to do research to examine the psychological impact.
Yeah,
if you are a finance major, I wanted the finance major to examine the fiscal impact of slavery, right? So they can understand that slavery was the sociological and the psychological the impacts that it had on our culture. And there was something called seasoning. Seasoning was because some Africans, not slaves, Africans were hard. They would not give up the Geechee people, my people from South Carolina, kept their language, kept their culture. And what the slave master, and it really was the seasoning practice really was in the Caribbean. It was practiced over here too, but in the Caribbean in a major way, because the plantation system was tough in the Caribbean. And they would create a system called seasoning, which the intent was to completely break your tie, the psychological tie with Africa. Remember the scene in Roots when that man beat, when the overseer beat Kunta Kinte until he said his name was Toby.
Yep.
That was a part of seasoning. Lynchings were a part of seasoning to frame your mind, not just the mind of the African in America, but the mind of the white person in America. I can do whatever I want to do to him or her. I can do whatever I want to do because they're my property. And then because it was ingrained into them, after slavery, when Reconstruction happened, they had a major problem, which is why the only three things the South wanted was the troops to be moved out,
Yep.
the railroad deal, and to leave them be on how they treated the Negro. That's the only three things they asked for. Because, and to this very day, and this is why, one of the reasons why they revolted on January the 6th, because Black and brown people came out in groves to defeat their leader. Donald Trump was not the leader of the President of the United States. He was the leader of that group of people. That group. And when we got rid of him, it was a direct attack on them, on their spirit of nationalism, the culture of, we can call Mexicans rapists and murderers and get away with it. The culture of, we can call Haiti and African countries blank hole countries.
Yeah.
We can talk about Black people the way we want to talk.
Call our football players sons of bees, Reverend Green, 1876, two different countries. We're dealing with the same thing today, two different countries.
To this very day. And the reason why one of the reasons why this mob was so angry on January the 6th was because of what happened in Georgia. What happened in Georgia when a Black man, the pastor of Dr. King's church.
What are the odds of that?
Became the first African American ever elected into the Senate in the history of Georgia. Now, not only that, a Jewish man was also elected in Georgia. And now what happens is a Black woman named Kamala is now the deciding vote in the United States Senate. It was too much for them. So all the teachings of QAnon, all the teachings of Fox, of Donald Trump, remember when the white supremacist mob in Charlottesville said, you will not replace us. There are individuals who believe that when this becomes a minority country, that somehow the minorities will do to the then majority will do to the minority what the majority now have done to us. And that's not our nature.
No, it's not.
That's not our nature. That's not our nature.
Nope.
And so, but they're taught this. They're taught to keep up arms, to take arms, to arm yourself. Because when Malcolm said the revolution will not be televised, or someone said that, maybe it was Public Enemy, someone said that the revolution is not going to be televised.
Right.
They actually believe that. They actually believe that because they believe that their rights, their way of life, their culture is under attack. When the United States of America, when God created this country, he created this country for all. The words, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Those were God's words. It was God's words. It was man who messed that up.
Mm.
But God's ideals for his people are never questioned. It is always man's interpretation and implementation that is always in question, because man is sinful, man is imperfect, God is not. And so God created the ideals of America to be the shining light on the hill, so that give me, you're tired, you're poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Those are God's words. Give me, you're tired, you're poor. That's what America is supposed to be about. It is not supposed to be about a president of the United States who promotes fear and divisiveness. It is supposed to be a country where we look out for our neighbors, no matter what color they are, where we help people, we build people up. We give them. Somebody said, "Well, we believe in America. It's the you pull yourself. But what is it?
Pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
By the bootstraps. But most of us don't have any boots. And if we
You
have boots, we
talking
don't
about
have
the bootless
straps.
man.
They're bootless. That's a bootless plan. It's a bootless plan. So this is what we're fighting, Amir. So we're going to go into it deeper.
On Tuesday, I'll tell you what, you gave so much tonight, brother. My God, you got me excited. I think I got 3 pages of notes already.
Yes, sir.
Listen, this is exciting. And, again, Tuesday at 7 p.m., we'll be putting the Zoom information out there. How uprising, violence, and privilege upended our democracy.
And I'll leave you with this. Compromise of 1877 led to a culture of supremacy. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson legally separated the races. It didn't get overturned until 1954, Amir, 16 years before I was born.
Wow. 1954.
1954. Brown versus Board of Education. That's what overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. 1965 is when our voting rights were really guaranteed, 5 years before I was born. That's why when we say upended democracy, this country will never be great until we fully are committed to living up to the American ideals that God has placed in us.
We're gonna talk about that on Tuesday. I'm make sure I'm gonna bring that question up, because I want you to end with, on Tuesday at least, what do we do now? What are the next steps? How do we get to that point? You talked about where we could be, where the present minority becomes that majority, but we're not going to treat the then minority the way this minority is being treated now. It reminds me of that picture on January 6th when they were scaling the walls, and someone put on Facebook or social media, we're not asking you to shoot them like you shoot us. We're just saying we don't want you to shoot them the same way we don't want you to shoot us. And that's our heart, that's our nature, that's the nature of God. And
I'll just say thank God for social media, because
what if social media was around in 1876?
What's that?
What if social media was around in 1876?
Absolutely. Thank God for social media. Thank God for electronic media, because there is a permanent coalition of people in this country that came together. And I believe that one of the things, or one of the moments in time that brought us together was the tragic death of George Floyd.
Yep. That was definitely a strategic inflection point right there.
And you saw when I went to Westfield, New Jersey, and I saw a crowd of white people screaming, "Black Lives Matter." I said right then, this is a transformational moment in history. That's the first thing I said. The second thing I said was praise God for the life of George Floyd, a man that no one knew. He was an invisible man to many. And to quote the book. And the third thing I said was Donald Trump is in trouble, because if this coalition can stay together, the coalition of Black and brown people, of white people, men and women, particularly women, of Asians, of progressive people, gay and lesbian, that coalition, transgender, that coalition of people who believe that we may not always agree on everything, but we are American. And that's the common bound that holds us together. And I think that is what we have to focus on. We really have to focus on what kind of country we want. We have to focus on the injustices, on marginalized communities, because if we focus on the former slave, that all trickles. You see, when we have a just society, and what my white brothers and sisters, friends of mine that I went to boarding school with, have to understand that what affects me will affect you. You know, if they ignore Black people in reference to testing in COVID-19, then your people are going to be impacted by that as well. We are one society. What affects me affects you, Amir. What affects Amir, what affects your other neighbors. We are one society. And what happens is that, particularly in New Jersey, we think that we are protected by our zip codes. Huh. We think we're protected by our zip codes.
COVID changed all that, didn't it?
Huh?
COVID changed all that, didn't it?
COVID changed all that. COVID changed all that. What impacts Newark will impact Livingston. What impacts Cherry Hill will impact Camden. What impacts Trenton will impact Lambertville. We are one society. And so it is to your interest to make sure that we have a just society. Dr. King was prophetic. He was a prophet. He was not a saint. He was a prophet. It's a difference. He was a prophet. A prophet, God works in imperfect people to be prophets, to speak a word of truth about what can happen. When he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I will expand that. When we have people who are poor and can't afford to pay their bills, and they are poor in a cycle of poverty because of the color of their skin, it's going to impact all communities at some time. But if people are doing well, and they're healthy, and they trust the system, and they trust the health system, and they're living productive lives, all of our communities are safe. We all thrive. That's what true Islam should be about. That's what true Christianity should be about. That's what true Buddhism should be about. That's what true Hinduism should be about. It should be about the uplifting all of, not getting involved in theological debates, but uplifting all people so that all people can reach their full potential while we're on this earth.
Brother, you gave a mouthful this evening. Thank you so much again to all those that are listening. Listen, tune in Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. This great topic is going to be, and that's going to be with Dr. Reverend Derick Green, along with our dear friend, Dr. Stephanie Harris. the head of the Homicide Commission here in New Jersey. Again, it's how uprising, violence, and privilege have upended democracy. I'm looking forward to that on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Listen, get this word out, share this video. You'll be hearing from Dr. Stephanie Harris as well tomorrow. And we want to see as many as you can get on this on Tuesday. I think you'll be able to open it up for some questions in the chat room.
Yes.
We won't interrupt you, but I know you and Stephanie will be going back and forth talking about this.
Yes.
Boy, listen, I promise you, you get the two of them together. You hear what Reverend Green brings to the table. You get the two of them together. They start feeding on each other. It's going to be so much revelation and knowledge that we're going to receive on this coming Tuesday at 7 p.m. Listen, God bless you, everyone. God bless you, Reverend Green. Thank you so much. What great information. You fired me up, my brother. You fired me up. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got my notes here. I'm going to study them.
Yes,
God bless you.
Bless
God
you, man.
bless you, everybody.
Right.
See you on Tuesday night.